There's always a lot of graces on a pilgrimage, but especially when you go to the great island of Ireland. And when I first started off on the pilgrimage, I went and got to celebrate Mass at the church where the Donoghue family, which is O'Donoghue, came from during the potato famine. A little church called St. Vincent's, and it's in an area called the Dingle Peninsula, which is in County Kerry. Beautiful. It's just the greens and the sheep and the fields and the people. And in this town's probably smaller than the actual property of St. Simon and Jude. And as they say on their website so proudly, there's one library, there's one school, there's one church, but 3 pubs. That's Ireland. And just beyond there, in fact, you could see it at night. The sun would set around 10 or 11 at night. It was a slow sun. And it was beautiful because it really never rained there. Everybody told me that it rains a lot. In fact, it never really rained that much. But at any rate, as the sun was setting, you could look out over the Atlantic Ocean, and you could see this huge island called the Skellig Michael. And it was on this island. It's 700 feet from the sea level. It reaches up. And it's just this sheer rock island. But these monks, these Irish monks, went out there to live in the 7th and 8th century to do kind of spiritual warfare on behalf of Ireland. They felt like these evil spirits could come from the Atlantic Ocean, and what they wanted to do was to be out there battling by just offering up this really rugged lifestyle. They're the first ones who create kind of like a microclimate by building the walls the way they did so that the temperature could be warm enough to grow crops. And it was just this sheer rock out in the middle of an ocean 8 miles from the mainland, where these monks would pray, they would read scripture, and they would simply live a life of penance on behalf of the people. And it was groups like this of monks and monasteries around Ireland that for 200 or 300 years preserved Christian culture until St. Boniface and others could come into the mainland Europe and bring the knowledge of Scripture and the knowledge of our history to Europe as it went through the dark times. But at any rate, what was so fascinating by that is that anybody who knows Star Wars, the end of Star Wars was filmed up there, where Luke Skywalker and this girl Rey would meet. That's how the movie ends. So I got a little skinny that the little preview that they went and filmed there again. And the first 15 to 20 minutes of Star Wars is going to be filmed in that area. And it's all about that. That it's as if Ireland and Europe has forgotten the faith, or at least it's just become a museum. And what you start to realize is how Mexico, the United States, Latin America, and other countries which were evangelized originally by the Spanish and the Irish, are now in need of us to pray for them, of us to just simply be a witness to what it is to be from a family like we have, or to simply have a church that we have, or to have friendships that we have. And what was so inspiring is to see 15 of our young adults going into Ireland, and we spent 2 weekends in this one parish, in this like 3 or 4 churches of 2 parishes that were together. And in our young adults, what they would do is they would form part of the choir. We called them the Terrible Towel Choir, and because they all brought terrible towels, obviously. But and you know, some of them would do the readings, they would serve, but each Mass we'd have one of the young adults go up and give a 3-minute testimony, just simply on their own journey. Not necessarily saying like they're the greatest in the world and they need to be following them, but more just giving their life testimony of, you know, why they're there, who they are, and a little bit of their background. And it was so inspiring to see both the people at the church and each of these young adults were hosted by these different families, to see the way the connection of our young adults and our families would connect with the families there. You know, at the end of it all, we you could really just see the way in which just being authentically who we are, how that can just be such a light of hope into a country that's kind of in need of a great deal of hope. During these 10 days, we did all kinds of stuff. We did this rally through Dublin, which it's a great way to kind of do tourist stuff, but yet without being tourists. So they each had to carry around these terrible towels, and they went by teams, and they're given a sack of potatoes with 4 raw eggs in it. So part of the idea was to get around Dublin without breaking the eggs. Half the teams did, the other half did not. It was a shame. But at any rate, so they would go around and see all these historic churches and these different sites. There's this one beautiful statue of a homeless man who's just wrapped up in these old blankets on a bench. And they had to get a picture with it. And then as you look down, you see that this homeless man has holes in his feet. And then you realize it's the homeless Jesus who identifies himself with those who are suffering, those who are homeless. And it's that type of a rally where they're going around Dublin being this kind of wacky witness to hope in some ways. You know, they would teach people in a bar how to Irish dance, even though most of them didn't know how to Irish dance. It's all kind of part of the fun, you know. But they'd see these different churches, the site where St. Patrick would do all these baptisms and things of that nature. And we climbed up this thing called Colpatrick, which is one of the great mountains of Ireland. And the thing about Colpatrick is that in 4 hours you get all 4 seasons. You know, at some point you're praying for the snow so that hopefully the wind and the rain would slow down, right? But then at other points, the sky's open, and it's one of the last points. It's like the last step, if you will, because it's one of the most western mountains in all of Europe before you go across the ocean. And so at one point you can see on one side the ocean, the other these beautiful islands and things. And as you get closer to the top, it gets harder. It gets steeper, and there's these rocks that it's almost like if you take a step forward, you go a half step backwards. And for the last, 35, 40 minutes, there's this just grueling weather and these rocks. And at some points you have to go on your hands and feet just to kind of make it up. And then one of the people who had gone before me, my cousin, he'd been up there a bunch of times. He sent me a text before I went. He goes, "Don't be discouraged if there's these old ladies walking up that mountain barefooted." I'm like, "Oh, thanks. I was hoping to get up the darn thing, you know?" Anyway, once you get up there, you start to realize something that's just so powerful. It's what we hear in the gospel today about the transfiguration. That usually the setting in which we experience God is these mountain-like settings. But in order to get there, you have to follow Christ. In other words, it's going to be rugged. There's going to be a lot of challenges. There's going to be moments when you want to turn around. There'll be times when you just can't go forward. And one of the things that motivated me up at the mountain was one of the guys that was with us. We called him Shepherd 4 because he was in charge of leading the troops up the mountain. He got up the mountain and then ran back down to help all of us try to get up the last leg. And when I saw him walking back, I was like, wow. And it just motivated me. And it started to dawn on me as we got up to the top. We were all excited because we'd made it, and you're looking down and seeing all this. Just the joy and the thrill of walking up together, these great challenges, and the great experience of God that you have enveloped in the clouds and in the sheer weather of it all, just looking around like that was unbelievable. And then we got to have Mass up at the top there. Colpatrick is where St. Patrick used to go up and do his 40-day retreats. And it's so beautiful. There's a little church up there where, you know, it's one of the coldest Masses I've ever celebrated. The good thing was every time I said something, my words would freeze before they got to your ears and just crumble in ice. So I didn't really have to say anything, which was good. But it was just being up in that church. And I guess what I reflected on was I just lost, my grandfather had died a couple months ago. And I was thinking about my family that had left Ireland to come to the United States and how grateful I am that they witnessed their faith to so many people in my life, and obviously my grandfather witnessing it. And it was just a time for all of us to think back to our own family and friends and relatives who have been a witness to hope and faith for us. And I think all of us in that church, we felt this kind of connection with our past and where we were and where we were heading, and knew that there was something special about being up on that mountain. You hear today St. Peter writing about it in his scripture, in the reading, in the letter that he wrote. And he goes, we're all eyewitnesses. And you know what? Every day we are eyewitnesses to different things, whether it be drunk people at a regatta, whether it be the pirates, whether it be more serious things like seeing our children get married or seeing our family members pass away. We're all eyewitnesses to something. But to me, one of the things that really struck me about seeing our 15 young adults going to Ireland is to see how joyful they were in witnessing whatever it was they were thrown into. And it made sense because we were together. I don't think any of us could have made it through had we not been together. It wasn't about just going on a crusade by ourselves. It made sense because we were connecting with the Irish families that were living with us, or that hosted us. It made sense because of the church that we've been connected with our whole lives. And it made sense because of the friendship of the 15 of us who went over there. And it's a little microcosm, I think, for our own little families, our own communities, in our own church world that we have to live in. To be witnesses not simply to the things that pull us down, but to be witnesses especially to those transfiguration moments that can be signs of hope in a world that perhaps needs more hope. You know, at the end of it all, no matter where we went, no matter what we did, we stuck out, namely because we were twirling terrible towels everywhere we went, but also because we weren't afraid to really dive into what we were doing. At every Mass, we did probably 20-some Masses over in the 2 weekends. We always sung this hymn to Our Lady of Knock, in which we spent 2 days in the beautiful place in which Mary appeared to the simple farmhands for about 3 hours. And when we sang that song the one time, one of the ladies after Mass, an elderly lady, came up and she was nearly in tears. And she goes, you know, I haven't heard that song in 30 years. Thank you for reminding me of that melody. And maybe that's kind of what it means to be a witness to hope, which was the name of our project. To simply be able to recall and share with others the great gift of who Jesus Christ is for us, witness through our family, through our relatives, and through our church.